Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at trigger discipline via the Westland Whirlwind. So, Westland Whirlwind is a heavy fighter, it's in the British line battle rating 3.7. It is equipped with 4 nose-mounted Hispano Mark 1 cannons. Notably, these are different to the Mark 2s that exist on the Spitfires and Typhoons. And it's also different from the Mark 5s on the later Spits and the Tempests. About the aircraft, it's a very good heavy fighter. I would say it's probably the best of the heavy fighters because A, it gets an air spawn, B, it climbs very well. You can see it's sustaining reasonably well, an 18-degree climb angle. If you climb up in this thing, you're likely to be the highest in the game. Without the existence of any XP-50s or other aircraft of that nature. However, 240 rounds for its 4 guns is not a lot. So, in order to have really good games in this aircraft, you need to maintain trigger discipline. The gameplay in this replay, I will say, is not particularly enthralling. There's no extended dogfights, and in fact heavy fighters you tend not to get any of those because you lose. But what I want you to see is the good and the bad examples of trigger discipline. Now, I finished this game with 5 kills. We're only going to look at 3 of them because the final 2 were bombers, and you'll probably get the pattern from the first 3 kills what trigger discipline really looks like. 240 rounds, 4 guns. It's essentially the same firing time that you get on something like the early Spitfires and the early Zeros. However, you don't also have the low caliber weapons with higher ammunition sources. So once you've used your cannons, you are out and you have to go back to base. A quick note on heavy fighters. These, for the most part, heavy fighters are not subtle aircraft. I would say, whereas fighter aircraft can be more like ballerinas of the sky, heavy fighters are much more like sledgehammers. The goal in aircraft like this is to try and take the easy kills as quickly as possible to try and thin out the numbers. An aircraft like this, if you find yourself in a 3v1 or 4v1, especially when the enemy team is fighters, then you are in real danger. Your chances of winning that in any heavy fighter, let alone the Whirlwind, are very low. So what you need to do is try and make as much of an impact as you can early and hope that that allows you to get your team into a winning position and bridge yourself into the later portions of the game if you have to return to base, or if you've exercised good trigger discipline, cash in later in the game, as I did with 2 bomber kills to finish up. As you can see, we've got a P61 here. P61 is the highest enemy in the game, and so, as is fairly typical for my gameplay, we're going to look for the highest target first. We can see there's a P51 down below, about 7 kilometers away, and we'll see a little bit more of him in a second. So just diving in, again, this aircraft, heavy fighter. P61 is also a heavy fighter, so we don't need to be particularly concerned about heavy dogfighting. Our approach can be fairly heavy-handed. So you can see he's diving away, trying to gain some distance, but he sees us, puts in a turn. I could have shot here, and in fact I do shoot a little bit later, but I waited until I got as close as possible before shooting. Now, I wasted probably a bit too much ammo there. You saw, even though it was just 2 short bursts, that's essentially a quarter of my ammunition gone. I could have shot from 600, 700, 800 meters, but because my ammo is limited, I wanted to try and guarantee as much as possible, notwithstanding my bad aim on the first burst, conserving ammunition. I'm still getting used to these guns again. This is the first game that I've played in this aircraft for probably a year, and I don't believe there's any other aircraft that use the Hispano Mark 1s. So, as you can see, we've caused the P51 to stall himself out in front of our guns. Again, we close to about 400 meters, fire a short burst, and he disintegrates. We went from 180 to 148 rounds, so that's 32 rounds of ammunition. At that rate of consumption, I could probably stretch this ammo count to 6-7 kills if I needed. In this game, it didn't happen, but it's possible. So now that we've killed the P-51, take stock of the situation, we see that most of the fighting has moved down to the deck, and so it's time for us to dive down and see what we can do here. We've got a J-26 and a Yak-3 fighting against a 190 and an F-6C. I was initially looking to go on the J-26, but then I see that the Yak-1 is making a break for it. He's broken off the combat and is trying to head home. Yak-3s, really any fighter to be honest, when I see one heading to base in a heavy fighter, that becomes my first priority. The other fighters can deal with the J-26, and in fact there he just dies. But when an aircraft that makes it back to base takes off again, that's where you get in a very, very awkward spot as a heavy fighter. They can get themselves an energy advantage. There's not much you can do when an enemy single-engine fighter has the advantage. Again, I could have shot from 600, 700, 800 meters away, but I want to guarantee the kill with as little ammo as possible. So he's close to about 400 meters, fire again. And this time we get down to 104 cannon rounds. So again, only expelling about 40, 45 rounds each. I could have been even more disciplined on the trigger there, but noting that the game at this point is already sewed up, they only really have 3 bombers and 1 enemy fighter remaining. I just wanted to guarantee the kill as soon as possible. So that's the last of the 3 kills that I'm going to get. Let me just talk about the advantages of trigger discipline. You watch videos from very good War Thunder players, and I'm not one of them, and people like Defin. What you find is that they are able to regularly get 6, 7 kill games where they just seem to run over the whole enemy team. It is very hard to do that if you have to return to base to rearm. And if you want to start having the potential for really big games, you need to start practicing trigger discipline as much as possible, because if you run out of ammo or you jam your guns or something like that, then your impact in the game becomes very limited for the next up to 6, 7, 8 minutes as you return back to your base, land, rearm, and then take off, climb to altitude again. It is really, really, really important that you learn this skill and practice this skill. There are so many times that I've watched teammates fly after an enemy. The enemy doesn't know they're there. They shoot from 700 meters away. They miss because 700 meters is a very long distance. Enemy knows they're there. The next shot is much harder. If they just waited 3, 4 seconds, closed the distance down to 400, and even 500 meters, and then fired the shot, chances of hitting are much higher. The chances of the enemy react are much lower, and so therefore your chance of getting a kill without expending much ammunition is vastly increased. I-185 is coming at us here. I just loop over the top of him. He's not able to get a shot off. I then loop over. I could have pursued him straight here, but then I see the DB3. I look for a cursive shot as we go past. Unfortunately, I'm just a bit too slow, not able to get the shot, so we recommit back to the I-185. I'll quickly mention here, again, this is an important target priority thing. Even though the game is largely sewed up, this is really the only remaining threat on the enemy team. And so before we go after the bomber aircraft, I would very much like to remove the final fighter from the game. You can see the Key 44 has the same idea, and in fact he's going to get the kill before we can get there. But target selection, even in games where you're winning like this, is very important. He is dead, and now it's just a matter of going and cleaning up enemies. So as the game starts to wind down, I won't show the clips of me killing bombers. It's pretty standard. I used about 25 rounds per bomber. The first one took 1 shot to kill. I just set him on fire, and then he died a few minutes or a minute or so later. Second aircraft, go in for 1 pass, set it on fire. I then have to go out the other side, turn back. He puts out the fire. and then we come in, set him on fire again, from which he does not recover. So yeah, trigger discipline, useful for many reasons. Reason number one, it helps you to have more staying power in games, right? Start to convert those 2-3 kill games into 4-5 kill games because you don't have to return to base. Point number two, it actually gets you more kills because if an enemy hasn't noticed that you're there, you're much more likely to hit from smaller distances. Reason number three, actually, I feel like this is an area where we don't talk about it that much. My feeling is that firing in short bursts actually helps your aim. If you just fire in one long continuous burst, you often don't know if you've led too much or led too little, because you're kind of waving around your cursor around the enemy aircraft. What I think you should be doing is firing a short burst and then adjusting, firing another short burst, adjusting. That's what you saw with the first kill with the P61, right? I fired a burst. I was able to very clearly see that I didn't take enough lead. And so the next burst, we made sure to take a little bit more, and that was all it needed. Okay, that's just about all that I wanted to talk about today. I hope you have a good one. I'll see you next time.